Hey there, colleague. How in the world are you doing? I hope that you're doing well. I have to just do something right now, and that's respond to a beautiful letter from a reader. A reader wrote in recently in response to a post that I wrote last week and said, "Hey, Dave, my administration is planning tons of changes and more for the 21-22 school year. What should I do?" And I love this question because it's deeply human. This is a person saying, "I'm at my wit's end. I've just gotten through whatever it was that we just got through. I don't feel like I have much left. And yet at the same time, the messaging I'm receiving is like, well, let's just do a ton more. What do I do?" I love this question and I love it so much. And I love all the different perspectives that answering it well requires that I've gotten myself into quite a long blog article that is still not ready to publish, but I really want to respond to this question because I think probably some other people are experiencing it. So what I did is at the end of the class that I just got done teaching, I just, while my students were writing, I also wrote down 6 things that I think we can all do if we're in a situation where we're feeling like next year might just be super overwhelming and high pressure. Now you might be thinking, oh, great, Dave, 6 things. That's the name of your book, right? Great. Well, yeah, it is the name of my book, These 6 Things, How to Focus Your Teaching on What Matters Most. But my 6 things aren't going to perfectly match the 6 things in the book, but I did just literally think through the book and the things that I said in the book that are most relevant to me as I approach teaching in 21-22, because I'm that teacher too, in a way. Like, I'm not saying my administration is planning all this new, but I feel sort of at my wit's end in a lot of ways. And I don't think that my students are a ton different. So I want to have a great year. I want to advance the long-term flourishing of the students in my care. I want to teach them as much as possible and all of us together learn and achieve as much as possible. I want that. But I want it to be deeply humane too. I want it to feel good most of the time. What are the things? Let's talk about the things. Thing 1, return to purpose. Return again and again and again and again and again. Up here in my classroom, there is this sign that says, we are in this classroom are all about becoming better thinkers, readers, writers, speakers, and people. That is my Everest statement. In the first chapter of These 6 Things, I talk about the Everest statement. And I talk about the bigger picture idea that every single one of us, whether you teach reading or arithmetic or science or social studies or art or music or kindergarten or 12th grade or college, or you're a social worker or a psychologist or an administrative assistant, all of us are invested, engaged in the work of advancing the long-term flourishing of young people by helping them to master as much material as possible. In school, we uniquely teach young people things that they may not choose on their own. We teach them about things like in my class this year, in my world history class, almost everything are things that my students wouldn't necessarily select to learn on their own, but everything is the type of stuff that if you know it increases the likelihood that you'll flourish long-term. You never know when knowledge is going to bless you down the road. That's thing 1, is always return back to purpose. No matter what we're being told to do from the outside, we can return back to purpose. We can come back to center and we can seat ourselves right on the work that is at the core of our work. I'm mixing up my order now. Number 2, I'm going to say the second thing that we can do is teach from this position. The world is filled with wonder. Learning things is incredible. No one has ever been impoverished by gaining information, gaining insight, gaining understanding, gaining a conceptual grasp of more of the world. And by impoverished, I mean the whole life sense, not just economically. It is self-growing to learn. And so when we teach from that place of knowledge richness, knowledge generosity, we can turn any class, any subject into something that is really special in a world that is so bent on things like utilitarianism or just expressivism. We say, hey, there's stuff in the world to learn that's bigger than me and bigger than you. And actually, even though most of the world kind of turns up their noses at maybe algebra or physics or whatever you teach, we're not going to, because we say, why not? I want to know about that stuff. The world is filled with wonder. that one was kind of, again, like a headspace thing, but let's now give you something really practical. There's one thing that I think folks should study in the coming year, no matter what the world is telling them to do. I think we should all study belief, because fundamentally what our students and parents and us are mired within is this crisis of belief. Is school actually valuable? Is learning things actually valuable? Are teachers actually the kind of people who know what they're doing, who know how to advance the long-term flourishing of young people by teaching them to master things? Are teachers like that? Can all children actually improve through wisely applied effort, through the right times, the right kinds of learning techniques? Is that really a thing? Do all kids actually belong in academic environments? These are the things, the fundamental questions that are being asked all around the United States and the world. And the 5 key beliefs methodology, which I've written all about across the blog and in chapter 2 of the book, that is, I think, the most promising way to think about influencing these beliefs in our settings. We want to influence them when we talk to parents. We want to influence them when we talk to young people. We want to influence them in our email communications, in our text messages, in our collegial conversations, at our PLC meetings, at our staff meetings. We want to influence them from the district office level and from the level of the person who greets kids on the bus. Like, all of these places are places where the 5 key beliefs can be cultivated. They can be encouraged, nourished, grown. We can't force a child to believe anything. That's what's so easy to miss about motivation. We think in terms of getting kids to do behavior, but that's only ever going to be hollow if we don't also deeply understand the heart. So study the beliefs. That's my 3rd recommendation. No matter what everyone else is telling you to study, you study those. Number 4, this one comes from chapter 4 of the book, and here's the line. To argue is too human. To argue is too human. How can you take what you ask students to learn and frame a unit, frame a course, frame a lesson around an argumentative question, a question that encourages students, just by how it's framed, to see things from multiple angles. You can only see things from multiple angles if you know the angles, though. Be mindful of that. Sometimes we think that we can just force open-mindedness onto people, but it's knowledge that creates open-mindedness, or at least the possibility for it. Knowledge, deep, nuanced, complex knowledge. And who better to cultivate that type of thing than you, educator? Who better? So I've written about earnest and amicable argument. This is the kind of argument that, at least in the United States, is almost entirely lacking. We're a nation of people right now, unfortunately, that morally disengage from one another. We view our side, our position, as like the noble, the good position, and the other side we diminish in our hearts. But classrooms built on earnest and amicable argument reverse that trend and make us all more human-y. Second to last, here's the thought. Writing equals thinking, and thinking equals power. My students are 9th graders, and boy, do many of them love initially to complain about writing. But you know what we do during our warm-ups and in the middle of lesson writing prompts and at the end of lesson writing prompts, however I arrange it in a given day, you know what we do? We normalize writing. Writing is thinking. Writing shows me what I actually know and am able to articulate. Not just that which I'm vaguely familiar with. All of my students have seen the V word, vague, written on their writing, and they know that it comes from a loving person who wants to push them into specificity, because specificity is clarity, is coherence. And man, watch out in the 21st century for the person who is able to think clearly and coherently. So this coming year, how can you get your students to write more? How can you build a culture where writing is really normal? I'm not talking about the super polished essay process. I'm not talking about anything except for getting students to write regularly in your class. Make it as natural as breathing. And do that not as like a burden I'm placing on your back, but as an opportunity. What if there was an environment like that in a science teacher's classroom, in a math teacher's classroom? in a physical education teacher's classroom. What would that look like without losing the soul and spirit of a science, mathematics, or physical education classroom? What would it look like? Last one. Speaking and listening are lovelier in person. I mean, Zoom's great, right? YouTube's nice. You and me get to have this little moment via video, and I sure appreciate it. I wouldn't, I wouldn't give it up willingly, no way. But gosh, I would love it if I could just be in a room with you talking and we could be having a conversation about this. And when you have students in class in the fall, that's exactly what you get to do. So in the book, the speaking and listening chapter, I talk about three templates for facilitating student discussion. Think, pair, share for pairs, and normalizing whole class sharing, conversation challenge for small groups, and pop-up debate or pop-up discussion for whole class. I only use these three templates for my class. I only have one way to get students talking to each other in pairs, one way to get them talking in small groups, and one way to get them talking as a whole class. And that doesn't create a boring, lifeless, mechanical classroom, because speaking and listening is lovely, especially when you do it in the context of a knowledge generous curriculum that you're providing. And, after having the chance to write, to clarify your thinking, and getting to be in a place where the teacher's just trying to cultivate the 5 key beliefs: credibility, value, belonging, effort, efficacy, like all this stuff really starts to work together in this cool, synergistic, life of its own kind of way. And it's a beautiful thing. It's not a perfect thing. Please come visit my class next year and you will see it's not a perfect thing, but it's a good thing. And you are doing a good thing too. So if you feel overwhelmed, especially about next year, try to just take the summer off as best you can. And when you come back, do a really small number of things, maybe 6 things. I'll see you later.